Welcome to Doc Secret, the show where we uncover the playbooks, strategies, and stories behind the most successful dental and medical practice owners and the companies that serve them. This show is all about building the best practice. Whether you're a dental or medical student dreaming of private practice, a seasoned doctor looking to grow or sell, or an investor exploring the healthcare space, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Kevin Carl, and in today's episode, we're diving into the world of telehealth in veterinary care. Let's get started. Welcome to Doc Secret. Joining me today is Dr. Shadi Ireifej. Dr. Ireifej is a board-certified small animal surgeon and the founder of VetTriage, a pioneering telehealth platform transforming how veterinary care is delivered. Born in Yonkers, New York to Lebanese immigrant parents, he graduated magna cum laude in biology from SUNY Binghamton before earning his Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree from Cornell University. Following rigorous internships and a surgical residency at Long Island Veterinary Specialists, he became a diplomat of the American College of Veterinary Surgeons. Over the course of his more than 15-year career, Dr. Ireifej has served as a staff surgeon, hospital owner, chief of surgery, and chief medical officer in veterinary practices across the U.S. In 2020, he launched VetTriage to provide pet owners with on-demand virtual access to licensed veterinarians while also offering professionals a healthier work-life balance. Today, Dr. Ireifej is recognized as an advocate for veterinary well-being, legislative change in telehealth, and purpose-driven practice culture. Dr. Shadi Ireifej, Shadi, if I may, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Well, your story begins in Yonkers with immigrant parents, and I just want to dive into that really personal aspect of your background. How did that shape your worldview and drive?
So my parents are absolutely precious. I'm very, very fortunate. I recognize how lucky I am to have parents like them. And I would say the number one aspect of their inherent personality was work ethic. They came here, you know, English not their first language, and had to thrive in a brand new country while trying to also bring over siblings and other relatives to America. So their diligent work ethic is one aspect of their parenting that I really appreciate. But I also add to that as well respect. They have respect for anybody they met. They have nothing but the utmost friendliness, whether it's a colleague or a friend or a stranger. And they don't realize this as parents, but us kiddos, we watch, we listen, and these things do rub off on us. So I would say diligent work ethic and having a mutual respect for humankind are two massive qualities that they instilled in me.
Wow, well, that's great, and what a testament to their parenting for you. I know that they poured their love into you. What was it about biology at SUNY Binghamton that pulled you toward veterinary science and later about Cornell's vet med program, arguably one of the very top programs in the USA, that pulled you towards surgery?
So my interest in science in general, especially biology, is actually stemmed from high school. Initially, we had in 11th and 12th grade, the biology teachers were just like these cool guys that were so down to earth. You felt like you were friends with them, but they were your teacher. And so they got me interested in biology and science. They made it fun, interesting. It's something about it resonated with me, and I think the fact that nature is all around us, and when you discover that people actually study this stuff and it's all around us, it something about that really stuck with me. And then entering SUNY Binghamton, upstate New York, for a biology major, I realized how applicable the principles of science that were first invested in me during high school became. So I recognized fairly quickly as a freshman that this science stuff is no joke. It's applicable across the spectrum of our species. And so from there, I became interested in veterinary medicine. It's interesting because Middle Eastern families, my dad's from Jordan and my mom's from Lebanon, were historically speaking, culturally speaking, not avid animal lovers in terms of having animals in your home. Animals served a purpose. They mostly spent time outside, and the chickens laid eggs, the goats gave you milk, your dogs protected the livestock. So to have a dog sleep in your bed is an unusual um, lifestyle for Middle Eastern folks. So anyway, for some reason, not only did I really enjoy learning about biology and science in general, but applying it to the real world, and especially with animal medicine, something about that just stuck with me. It really hit when I was volunteering at a hospital in upstate New York in preparation to get into veterinary school. They had a veterinarian there who would come in every Wednesday, perform spays and neuters. That's when I first realized surgery was something they perform on animals on a professional basis, and I thought, "Boy, that's exactly right. That's what I wanna do." So between the interest in biology, the life-saving measures that you have the ability to perform with surgery, and just the hands-on physical aspect of literally manually fixing an animal, that was everything for me. So, SUNY Binghamton, I pursued biology major. I graduated in a year early from Binghamton, and then getting into Cornell, which at the time and still, depending on the year, typically is the number one vet school. My love for all of this just flourished even further. The interest in surgery, to answer your final question there in regards to Cornell, came from one of my classmates. He had been working with the surgery department, I think maybe like after hours on call or maybe during the summers, but he knew that I was looking for some sort of interest in some sort of specialization in the small animal space at Cornell, and he's asked, "Why don't you become a surgical technician like I am?" And I did it, and that's when I realized you can specialize in surgery. So you can not only be a veterinarian and take care of animals and fix them up, but you can actually specialize in that where that's all you do. So I hit the ground running after that.
Wow, well, that's fantastic. Well, go Big Red. I know I spent a lot of time up in Cornell with a background in hospitality, so that's the center of the universe for the hospitality folks. But the veterinary program is so powerful there, and congratulations to you for your success. And that set you up really well for the career that you're in. And I want to dive into vet triage. How did you come up with this idea for vet triage? Where did that come from?
In 2007, 2008, I was in the middle of my surgical internship at Long Island Veterinary Specialists, and I had been noticing that the receptionists were taking 100 calls a day. It's a 24/7 multi-specialty ER hospital in Long Island. At the time, outside of New York City, it's the only game in town. And so I thought to myself, these receptionists are answering a lot of the same questions from pet owners who are calling. They're calling up with some sort of ailment with their pet and asking the receptionist, "Should I come in? Is this an emergency?" And the standard umbrella statement in veterinary medicine to that question from folks who are not medically trained is, "If you are concerned, come in." And that left it up to the pet owner to make a decision because the front desk staff, they're not medically trained. And so they can't give medical advice. And of course, having a veterinary technician, which is the equivalent of a nurse in our field, or having a veterinarian get on the phone with that client is not a possibility. They're busy saving lives on the floor. So we had this blanket answer, if you're concerned, come in. And so I thought at that time, '07, '08, that if you can create a business model where veterinarians got on the phone and actually triage these pets, would that be something that would be of interest to pet owners and the industry? And so that idea slowly grew over time. Now in '06, '07, '08, having a video device in the palm of your hand did not exist yet. Skype was probably the only, or if not the only, the biggest video platform, and not a lot of people use Skype, at least in my world at the time. So I thought it would be a phone triage service. But anyway, over time, obviously technology got better and now everybody has video capabilities. So that idea went from a phone triage system to 24/7 video telehealth, with veterinarians, any animal type, global, multiple languages, through partnerships with facilities, and that's how VetTriage was born. We ended up launching a soft launch 2018, and then from there, more official launch before the pandemic, and then 2020 hits, and next thing you know, we're in a pandemic for the next 2 years. So that's the origin story of the company, the idea behind the company.
Well, I'd love to dive into that just with a bit more detail because that is uh, what is it? A labor of love, a love of labor, not sure which, right? I mean, that's a huge commitment to kick off a company like this, especially given the advance in telemedicine over that time period. Was there an aha moment for you when it actually went from idea to action? I'd love to just like dig into that a little bit. How did you translate it into, okay, this is going to be a real thing?
So I have to answer this question, I have to give a massive shout out to our development team. We have an internal development team. They're with us 24/7. They are fantastic. And they took this idea that admittedly at the time, because veterinary telehealth didn't exist yet, they took this idea that was sort of this brainstorming cloud in my mind and put it into concrete functionality. And so they devised a platform that was just phenomenal from day one. We've since improved it several times. It's obviously evolved over the past, 6 years or so of doing this. But the development team took an idea that was fairly abstract and made it concrete. And they're not a medical team. They don't know. And so how they came up with these things, I have no idea. It's part of the genius of the tech world. But anyways, so the idea became a lot more solid once the dev team actually built the entire platform, which is a web-based platform. And so that's how it came to be from a concept to that. I'll comment also on that career shift because I spend my entire career training in surgery. And so to go from the operating room, which is a full-on career, you're good. That's it. You're satisfied financially, you're satisfied medically, professionally. It's great. To go from that to literally working from home on a computer all day, trying to spearhead a movement in an industry that didn't not only did not have telehealth, but didn't really welcome it, was a harrowing feat for me. So I appreciate your recognition of that because that was a massive career risk to take at the time.
Well, I know for the entrepreneurs who are listening, they get it. But for the rest of us, maybe tell us a little bit about those first 6 months to a year of vet triage. Gosh, frankly, how did you start the business and what was that like? That's like taking a downstroke on a pedal going uphill, right? It's very hard to get the wheels moving. What was that like for you?
So that brings me to my second shout out, which is my business partner. He comes from the marketing world and he comes from the bank finance world, both of which I never had any experience with, no, nor have any interest really in. I prefer the medical side of things, right? But he's the one that established the company, took care of all the legal, the paperwork, the working with the development team to make it what it is, and he also has his own prior businesses. I have as well, but all veterinary hospitals, never anything outside my own sector. And he also specializes in mergers and acquisitions. So he has a he's strongly familiar with the corporate world and how all the players in the game operate. So he's the one that created the legal structure of this. Now, um, I also recognize because of him that our success is highly, highly unusual. It's a unicorn in the business world, in the entrepreneur world. So we were profitable within, I think, 3 months. We broke even in 6 months. And then from there, it just continued to grow. The numbers have only moved in a positive direction on a month-to-month basis. The trends do mirror that of brick and mortar facilities. So if the hospital setting or the clinic setting are are not as busy, then we're not as busy. But when they are busy, we reflect that as well. So our trends fluctuate throughout the year, but the vector is constantly moving in a positive direction. And I've never I have no appreciation for that because I've owned businesses that have only succeeded. It's veterinary hospitals succeed. It's hard to, but he's seen companies rise and fall, and so the unusual nature of our success early on was nothing but positive, and it continues to be so to this day. In fact, this past Summer Summers are the busiest months in the medical field in general, and the veterinary industry is no exception, are the busiest months, and so our June and July this year, record-breaking
Wow.
compared to all other months. Yeah, and so every month of the next year tends to break the record of the month of the preceding year, and again, I understand how lucky we are to do that. Having said that, though, of course, the concept of telehealth is a no-brainer. It's worked well in the medical side, the human medical side for decades, and it's obvious that it would work in the veterinary space. So I never had a doubt it would not work. It was just a matter of time. But to have his insight and appreciation for that makes me appreciate it even more because I was safely ignorant to failure, thinking this is going to work. Why wouldn't it work? And so that's how the initial 6 months to a year panned out. I was the only doctor on 24/7 on a global scale for every animal until we could afford our first veterinarian. And so even when you hire your first veterinarian on a platform that's 24/7, that that first vet isn't going to be able to alleviate my own commitment to the platform. So I was operating 24/7 myself for the first 5 years as we continued to add doctors, 10 vets, 15 vets, 30 vets, and now almost 80 vets strong. The past year and a half for me had been the easiest, let's say, because we have so many veterinarians on now to cover all the shifts 24/7 that I don't have to be on call all the time. But those first 5 years, even though we were growing, were quite brutal for my own work-life balance. But that's what you do, right, to succeed.
Yeah. I I'm sure you lived the life of 5 veterinarians at once, over that time frame, right? Such a, it can be both an invigorating and draining experience, I'm sure.
Absolutely. You're constantly trying to remind yourself why you're doing this and looking at the light at the end of the tunnel, but at the same time thinking, "Why why did I do this?" You know? All the confidence, that it'll succeed and all the passion in the world can only get you so far, but when you're severely sleep deprived, operating all night long with video calls, and then during the daytime having to had meetings to promote the company, push things forward, partnerships. Yeah, you're questioning everything at that point, but you keep going on, and next thing you know, you end up in a place that is pretty peaceful. Let's say, homeostasis has been achieved.
Well, I know you've built, you'd go back to your team for a second, right? You've built a platform. It's not just the incorporating other doctors into this, practice that's on 24/7, but it's also the underlying technology. Just to talk about that for a moment, your team had to build a workflow and your own EMR-like tool, and that's bold. I'm curious, what was your biggest technical challenge with, or maybe let me rephrase. What was your biggest challenge? Was it technical or regulatory? I mean, you were solving a lot of problems at once early on.
The, the benefit that I had being a board certified surgeon is that I've gone through many different hospitals, both in the training and the clinical aspects, and so I've seen many different types of electronic medical records over my career as I was learning to become a veterinarian and then to become a board certified surgeon. So I had a sense for what the market was in terms of the landscape with electronic medical records. And anybody who uses EMRs, electronic medical records, knows that there is no perfect system, and they're all equally annoying on their own. So you're picking the one that works the best for your work culture and workflow and your team and what have you. And sometimes you hit the nail on the head, sometimes you don't. You do it through multiple EMRs before you find one that works best. But none of them are perfect. And so I took what I knew from that and, um, actually, I used the platform that the development team built as sort of the foundation to then take take what we had, 'cause that's what we have. I gotta work within that context, look at EMRs that I've worked with in the past, and then create company protocols for the doctors, for the team built on the workflow. So that's why I was speaking so highly of the genius of the development team, because having no medical background, they devised a system that I was able to look at and say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. I can now turn this into protocols. And so just built the protocols based on the platform itself. So so to me that it's just genius on their end how they managed to do that. And maybe it was just a happy accident. I don't know, but it was perfect. So anyway, so I created protocols based on not only my own experience with EMRs, but the our web-based platform, and then my experience as a doctor, as a seasoned veterinarian, and created the protocols that still thrive to this day. It was some tweaks over the years, of course, as you grow, but these protocols have been stable over time in an industry that you said, legislatively speaking, did not exist before us, right? Now, technically, telehealth existed since the advent of telephones. That's probably when it started in veterinary medicine. Once you can call somebody, telehealth was born because people will call and veterinarians would give advice. And then, of course, you throw the internet in there and social media platforms. So veterinarians get questions all the time on Instagram, Facebook, etc., about pets, and so telehealth has existed for a while, but not in a formal sense. We took it and said, okay, from a medical standpoint, from a chief medical officer standpoint, what's the gold standard of telehealth? And we said, well, it's got to be video, it's got to be live, it's got to be any animal type. You'd like to offer multiple languages. You want to be global. It should be with veterinarians. And so once you start off with the foundation being the gold standard from a medical point of view, the legal stuff from there makes sense. It right? Like that's you're not trying to cut corners to save a penny or whatever here, and then hoping that no one catches you. You say no, build the gold standard, and then the outdated regulations or the non-existent regulations will hopefully mirror the gold standard, and then from there.
Well, I know that's a lot of heavy lifting. There had to be some anecdotal stories of success that really motivated you and the team. I'd love to know whether there's a story that you could share from the early days when Vet Triage truly delivered an impact, whether that's from a for an owner or a veterinarian. Would love to hear some of those wind in the sails type stories that kept you going.
Our very first session was, of course, with me and a dog owner, and it's and it's so funny. I don't remember the second session, but the first session we had, the first time somebody actually paid to talk to a veterinarian on this brand new platform, day one, I won't forget it. It was a collie mixed breed dog, um, and the gentleman lived in somewhere rural in upstate New York area, and the dog had some irritation in the eyes, and so I was able to talk to the pet owner like we're talking now, but on the Vet Triage platform, get the information about that pet, then look at the pet on the video, basically conduct my video examination is what we call it, and then talk to the client about how their eye condition is not an emergency. It looks like it's basically the equivalent of pink eye in people. It'll probably get better on its own, but they just so happen to have leftover eye ointment from that pet's eye issues in the past, and it was one that I would have liked to use in a clinic. And I said, great, we can use that for this. And in addition to using that ointment, I was able to also give them home advice that they can benefit from, that we can talk about if you'd like to. But point is that I've saved them an emergency visitation that they did not need, took care of the pet. The gentleman was thankful. The session took 8 to 10 minutes, somewhere in there, and we were done. And that was our first transaction from a client ever. So that's one that it's not sexy from the standpoint of life-saving measures, but to have that first person go to a company that did not exist before yesterday and say, "Yeah, I'll spend the money on this," and talk to a vet. And then from there, the spark was just ignited after that. Proof of concept was there, right? One person.
Yeah, validation, right?
Validation was there, and so that's a memorable moment. I would say probably the second, let's call them milestones. The second milestone was, unbeknownst to me, when hospitals began reaching out to us for partnership. The original concept here was to be in alignment with brick and mortar facilities, not in competition with them. Provide a service that can take care of pet owners' concerns after hours when their veterinarian is closed or unavailable for any reason, but we would not be creating an online clinic. That wasn't the goal. And the thought of partnership didn't really official partnership didn't really exist in my mind. I just thought that through word of mouth, veterinary clinics would recommend us or people would find us on Google search or whatever. Turns out veterinary hospitals actually wanted to officially partner with us and create protocols that are in alignment with their own work culture and their workflow, what they're looking for the clients that they serve and also the surrounding community pet owners. And that was the second milestone where we thought, oh, you can actually create official relationships with these facilities. And now you have a beneficial back and forth where they know how we operate, we know how they operate. The pet owner is going to love you even more now because everybody's in alignment, right? And so that was the second spark, the second spark that generated in me for this again, this validation, this proof of concept.
It's like the second stage of a booster rocket, right? Fresh wind in the sails, you've got a whole another level of validation, and a whole new world opens up. That's gotta be tremendously exciting. If you reflect on the whole of that triage from early days to now, what are you most proud of about vet triage?
It seems so it's so inspiring. It's funny because it's so surprising the impact that you have and inspirational at the same time that you really are helping pet owners. You're really helping them. And that may seem like a silly concept. Well, of course you're helping them. That was the entire point. But when you start learning about people's stories where financially, they can't afford emergency care, or they live in such a remote area that it takes a ferry ride or a plane ride to get anywhere, and so you're their only hope, and some of these animals have real emergencies, and they can't access emergency care for the next 2, 3 days, if at all, because of their situation, whether it's geographic or financial or whatever. And so you're making a massive difference, more than I thought. It went way beyond just putting some ointment in the dog's eye for irritation or infection. These are now animals that are internally bleeding. These are animals that have gastrointestinal or urinary obstructions. And these are animals that have severe conditions that require life-saving surgery if they're going to make it through. And they don't have access to that for maybe days, maybe not at all. So the positive impact we've had on pet owners who are in this situation, is huge. And it's probably, if you were to ask any of my team members what the biggest reason is for them not only hanging out with Vet Triage, but staying on for years, they would tell you it's that. It's the impact they have on the positive impact they have on pet owners that would otherwise be in trouble. Now they have a veterinarian to talk to virtually, and it's such a simple idea because the entire concept is simple for telehealth. It's nothing new for the on the human side, but boy, the impact we've had on these animals and these pet owners is massive.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's gotta feel so professionally rewarding. What are you focused on now? If you think about where vet triage is and where you're going, what are some of the things that are occupying your time as a leader of this great business?
So every year, we try to launch a new subset or a new offshoot of the original platform. So the original platform, VetTriage, was intended to triage animals, so that's teletriage, and give them advice, which is teleadvice, if they don't have an emergency. If they do have an emergency, and by the way, over 80% don't have emergency. So chances are, if you're a pet owner listening to this and you use the platform, even if you're even if you're freaking out that what's going on with your pet, there's a fairly good chance 8 out of 10 times you're not going to have an emergency, and we can avoid you from visiting that emergency hospital, spending that money, going through that stress. So triage, do you have an emergency or not? And if you don't, advice, if you do have an emergency, let's call you in to an emergency hospital or an on-call facility. If those are not options for your emergency, then we'll do the best we can with tele advice to help keep your pet medically stable and comfortable for as long as we can until you can seek somebody in person, hopefully, fingers crossed. So that's the original platform with teletriage, teleadvice. Then as we continue to grow in popularity, and by popularity, I mean more and more hospitals are partnering with us. And I would say probably in alignment with that, the third milestone that I'll bring up to you is when Cornell University partnered with VetTriage. The second my school recognized us and the number one vet school, right? Recognized us and partnered with us. That was the third milestone. And so through that, we started seeing, okay, if the universities can trust us, because they are the ivory towers, the gold standard, right? They publish all the papers, they do all the research, they are the standard. If they're trusting us, let's keep going with other aspects of this profession that need our help. So um, after vet triage became sort of a stable entity on its own, we then released Vet Triage Espanol. We wanted to help the Spanish speaking community with access to care because they have their own set of challenges. Some of it is cultural, some of it is geographic, some of it's financial, a lot of it is language barrier, right? And so we wanted to help that pet community. And so that was, I don't know, 4 years ago now. Shortly after that, well, about a year after that, we released Vet Triage Equine. So having equine practitioners on live video to speak to equine owners, because the equine field in the veterinary space has a very uh, depressing work culture. Let's say they have it rough, and so because equine horses in general are so unique, and equine practitioners are are the horse's only hope. We said, well, let's take the horse species, take it out of the standard platform, and make its own platform. And that was also under the ask of the American Association of Equine Practitioners, the AAEP. They came to us and said, "Can you build an equine platform?" And we said, We've wanted to, and this is we'll do it if you're gonna support us." And so within months, we had the platform built. So that was after that, and then finally, our most recent venture is Vet Triage Pro, which is teleconsulting, telementorship, and so, we can get into any one of these topics if you'd like to. The lack of mentorship is one of the reasons now, one of the top reasons, this is based on surveys over the past year, that new graduates, uh, either leave the profession or leave their first job after vet school because they don't have the mentorship they need to be set for success, and so we released early this year Vet Triage Pro, which is a telementoring, teleconsulting. That's vet to vet. That's no longer the pet owner talking to the veterinarian. That's the veterinarian who needs help with a case that's in their clinic, in their hospital right now, and they need guidance from a seasoned veterinarian. And so, of course, we hire seasoned veterinarians. And so now we have the telementoring, teleconsulting set up. So I won't go into future ideas because there's some exciting stuff coming down the pipes that are gonna continue to revolutionize the world of telehealth, and I can't say too much about them. But as far as what we've created so far, we now have a handful of platforms of vet triage to help target specific and large demographics that really need our help.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm reminded of episodes of this show. We've had an equine vet on, has talked about the challenges of her space, and particularly in the staff and burnout, which I'll come back to that in a moment. But also a younger veterinarian, younger in her career. She's recently gone through acquisition, a roll up, if you will, of her practice into a larger one. And one of the things that we talked about was how do you find mentors? So, gosh, I hope they're listening to this episode because it sounds like you've solved and are working towards solving some of the real challenges in this space. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of those challenges, veterinary burnout and staff shortages, right? They're systemic. How is telehealth and what you're doing helping address those pressures?
So I call the staff um, um, the lack of staff in our field of shortages a relative shortage because we have the largest number of vet schools in veterinary history, and we have the largest class sizes in veterinary history, and the number of applications continue to go up. And yet, for some reason, we have a shortage. The math doesn't add up. It doesn't make any
Mhm.
sense. Now, some of these veterinarians do go into industry. They work in pharmaceutical companies or research or whatever. Most veterinarians, though, when they graduate, are clinicians. They're going to be hands-on in the hospitals, in the clinics, saving lives. And so the numbers don't add up. And so my theory has been since the beginning that we don't have an absolute shortage, we have a relative shortage. And for some reason, even though we're pumping out all these vets year by year, where are they? Nobody can hire them. Nobody can find them to hire them. And so my theory always was the problem is not in the amount of vets you're producing; it's that there's no reason for them to stay. There's nothing keeping them in the workforce. And of course, it comes down to culture. That's always that's the problem, right? You can always argue, well, maybe they should be paid more or have more mentorship or they should have better work-life balance. All those matter too, but it's just something about the culture that's really poisoning the field. And so veterinary, and then you combine that with the mentality of millennials and then Gen Z, where they have a bit more idealistic view of what they're looking for with their own career. They want to do something that's not just lucrative, but they want to have an impact.
Right.
And if those two things don't align, they would rather do something else that maybe makes them even less money, even though they've spent years of their lives in higher education. They're like their mentalities, generations are screw this. I'll make money somewhere else,
Mhm.
and so we lose them. And so that's been my theory since day one, of tackling these cultural problems, is the veterinary shortage issue. So the way that telehealth helps with that aspect of it is, let's say you're an emergency hospital and you've partnered with VetTriage. We are your level one triage. Anything that anybody that calls that hospital or shows up has to go through VetTriage first. And if it's truly an emergency, then we will call them into that facility. If it's not an emergency, which again over 80% won't be, we can send you home with some advice and monitoring parameters until your regular veterinarian is open for an appointment that can be scheduled during operating hours.
Mhm.
So if you work at that hospital, that emergency hospital, and you partner with us, you now go from being a team of stressed out professionals that are dealing with both emergencies and non-emergencies coming in. Every time a non-emergency comes in, you're being taken away from a truly critical patient that needs you to walk away and deal with a non-emergency that could have waited for their veterinarian to open. And that stress um, resonates. It causes problems with individual patient care, causes problems with folks who work there getting burnt out, overworked, and then um of course on the management side, they see the numbers, so they that's what they're focused on, is that part of it, but they're not realizing that the elevated turnover that they're going to have from this poor culture is going to cost them more money in the long term. And
Mhm.
so if you work at an emergency hospital, this is all too familiar to you, where you're dealing with these non-emergencies that are taking away your attention from current and incoming emergencies. If you partner with us, you only focus on the emergencies, which is what the emergency hospitals want. And you actually will increase revenue in that facility by having less turnover and better individual patient care. Your veterinarian is more likely to invest their mindset on what your pet needs if they can fully focus on your pet and they're not worried about the 10 animals that are waiting in the lobby who are all not emergencies. They can focus on your pet. That turns into more diagnostics, better treatment, better finances for the facility. And so all that is all that works. So that's just one example of how we can help with the burnout aspect of this. The same goes for a general practice who partners with us, or an on-call facility who partners with us, or a rescue or shelter who partners with us. They all have their own reasons why they need vet triage, where they can fit us in to help alleviate that pressure. But the emergency aspect of it is one stark example of how to tackle that.
Well, that's a great example, and I appreciate that point of view. I wanna bring to this conversation another point of view that was shared with us. This is a recent guest on Doc Secret, and she voiced a concern that remote medical practice solutions, such as vet triage, particularly in small towns, may have a significant disruptor effect on the local veterinarian's viability as a business. And I'd just love to hear your take on that. How would you respond to that line of thinking?
Perfect. So that ties into the other side of the coin with an emergency hospital who's partnered with us. So let's say we've partnered with an emergency hospital. We're turning away 80% of the cases. They can go home and they could be taken care of and watched at home, but they do that until their family veterinarian is open again. So then let's say the next day or the next week, their family veterinarian, which is what the person you're inquiring about is alluding to, that general practice is now open. Their client, who would have spent hundreds, if not thousands, on an unnecessary emergency visit the night before, the week before, saved that money and now can invest that money into the general practice that they normally go to. And so that takes care of not only the medical issue they were dealing with, but costing less at the general practice. They can also how now they have the budget for the vaccines they're going to need eventually, the heartworm prevention they're going to need, the flea and tick prevention, right? They've now saved hundreds or thousands of dollars by avoiding ER to reinvest into prophylactic general practice care with their family veterinarian. That family veterinarian wants to see that client back. They want that client loyalty. And frankly, you always feel better seeing a physician that you've grown accustomed to. And some of these general practitioners, especially in small towns, they've been taking care of generations of families of pets.
Mhm. Yep.
So they really have deep ties to that pet owner and their dog or cat or whatever. They want to see them back. At the same time, that general practice does not want to hear that a client avoided going to the emergency hospital when it had to go in,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That they don't like that either because that animal should have went in yesterday or last week, and the pet owner didn't because maybe they were worried about prognosis, they were about finances, maybe they just didn't think it was an emergency, they just didn't know, right? And so this system with VetTriage partnership works on both ends. The general practice gets their case back in over 80% of the situations, which helps their revenue, better patient care, better veterinary client patient relationship. And the emergency hospital sees the truly emergent cases, and so they have much more of a balanced workflow because they can focus on what they specialize in, which is emergency. So that's our response to that kind of thinking is it actually works in tandem. The only reason why it works in tandem is because, as I said from the beginning, we're not creating an online clinic. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to fill a hole for those pet owners who are having a pet concern. Their regular veterinarian is unavailable. Emergency is maybe an option, maybe not, depending on their situation. They have to talk to a middleman. And you want that middleman to be a veterinarian on live video who's seasoned and experienced and empathetic. And so that's where we fit, right in that narrow niche.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. What would you say is the impact then for like equine health, which you mentioned earlier that you cover? There, people aren't necessarily going to bring their horse to, someplace on hours because it's very notable that equine medicine is very challenging. You mentioned that earlier in our conversation, and part of the reason it's challenging is those events happen at all times of the day and at home in some barn somewhere, right? Where they need emergency health, and that's really hard on equine vets. Talk a little bit, if you would, about how vet triage helps that demographic.
So the equine system is so emblematic of one of the biggest problems we have, which is veterinarians being on call. So imagine you're a general practitioner, equine or otherwise. You operate a 9 to 5 facility, Monday through Friday, whatever. But you are working either with a species like horses, or you're working that need emergency care after hours by an on-call doctor because they can't, like you said, they can't always just travel to the emergency hospital. They're at home and they're large animals, or that practitioner is in an area where there is no emergency options anyway, regardless of whether or not you're dealing with a cat, a dog, a hamster, or a horse. So on-call veterinarians have it the most rough. And so that was actually our first partnership on Vet Triage officially was with an on-call facility. Their veterinarians were getting burnt out. They had trouble hiring because the new graduates didn't want to be on call, but on call was mandatory for their area because they lived remotely. And so they thought, what if a veterinarian on live video triaged their cases, and then only we would call the on-call doctor to wake them up in the middle of the night for an emergency if we thought it was an emergency. That cuts that facility's phone calls down by like 90%. And you can imagine what that does to somebody who's been on call for decades, who's missed every holiday with their family, never had a weekend off, right? Could never plan dinner or movies or anything like that for decades because they had to be on call all the time. And they had no one else to share on call with. Maybe there's a nearby facility who rotates on call. Maybe you've got like a veterinarian who works at the practice who rotates on call with you, but you're talking about remote area with a lot of animals and not enough doctors. So equine is like that on steroids. They have to deal with it mandatory because you can't just throw a horse in a trailer and go to the emergency hospital. That doesn't exist in the majority of regions in the world. And so the veterinarian has to travel out there and visit that horse in the middle of the night, good or bad weather. Is that client sketchy or not? Right? Is that horse going to be aggressive or not? And how many miles are we talking? 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 miles one way? There goes your night.
Right.
Between waking up, driving there, saving the life, and then driving back, and then you work the next day, you're done,
Yeah.
right? So the equine field, has multiple challenges with which include horses are just a different beast. They're large, not easily transportable. You have on call, which can involve long distance driving, being on call all the time. It's and then you have, of course, a species that's quite fragile with horse owners who are quite intelligent about their
Mhm.
animal, right? And so all these things just creates a flurry of imbalance for work life balance. So that's so the equine community, um, they are they are retiring earlier and earlier in their career. There's less and less who are going to vet school who want to be equine veterinarians, and you don't have a lot of selection where you want to live. If we're talking about the United States, for example, you're living where the horses are.
Mhm.
Rural areas, not a lot of vets around. Forget emergency options. You are signing up for 24/7 on call until you retire or change careers. So that's what they're dealing with on that side of it. But the small animal side is dealing with the same thing. The dog and cat vets are also on call, dealing with the same problem. It's just not as magnified as the equine side because of the reasons I mentioned.
Mhm. Are you seeing a strong growth in that space, in the equine space?
Yes and no. So the rate of growth is not the same rate as the non-equine side. And that is because the equine culture is so deeply embedded with how they operate. They're so used to being on call and so scared of changing things, even though they know that they're dying in terms of work-life balance and enjoying their career. They're so worried about change in general that that ship has been very hard to steer. It's working. We continue to get more and more equine partnerships around the world, but that culture is so much more difficult to change than the non-equine. The non-equine side, so small animal, generally speaking, they're ready to give this up. The second they hear about us, they're like, "Yes, please take over on call. You just call us if there's an emergency." Equine, they are worried about what their clients are going to think. What if the client doesn't want to use us because we're not the hospital? What are you going to do about liability? What's the risk there? Right? They are so worried about that, and yet all the other solutions that they've tried in the past to alleviate themselves from emergency care and on call have not been as positive, let's say, or as impactful on a positive scale. So try something new. And so when we visit conferences, especially the equine conference, we're going to the one this year. I think it's in Colorado. I think it's in Denver. We exhibit there, and this will be our third year in a row going. And we try to not convince them, but state the facts. You've tried all these other things; it hasn't worked. You're still crying for help. Let's try this new thing. And the ones who are brave enough to say, you know what, we value our veterinaries, staff members, work-life balance so much that we are going to do this. We're going to take it, and they don't turn back. Once they dive in, they're good to go, but it's much slower than on the non-equine side, although in a positive direction, but still it's much more difficult thing to change.
Well, I can appreciate that, having spoken to equine veterinarians who embrace, even though it's almost like an addiction, right? There is a definite lifestyle around that, and I think their concern for the animals is so high, and yet they really feel the impact on their personal livelihood, in terms of being on call. Well, I want to shift focus here a little bit, because of your geographic distribution. I can only imagine how challenging it would be in terms of insurance and legislation and these other regulatory pieces. What legislative shifts or maybe even policy actions are most critical right now to enabling virtual vet care?
So there's, of course, a lot to that question. From the beginning, when my business partner and I were developing this, I told him that we need two things. We need to have research, publications to objectively show the impact that we are having on the field, the space of telehealth, and we need to lawyer up because veterinarians, medical professionals in general don't like change, and veterinarians especially don't like change, and this is going to be a change, and we are going to meet a lot of adversarial groups, whether it be formal organizations or medical boards or just individual practitioners. There's going to be people who love it and people who hate it and everything in between. So we knew that from the get-go, that we're going to be entering a space that's going to be contentious. Um, since then, I've lobbied in a handful of states in the U.S. to help promote the growth of telehealth, change the current laws, which are antiquated. I've also helped write the laws in Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada for their telehealth parameters, also Kenya and Australia. And so I try to be actively involved behind the scenes to help shape the wording, the terminology they use, because the biggest issue you have, if you are familiar with the words regarding telehealth, is legislation doesn't even they're not even using the right vernacular for this. So whenever I've reviewed any regulations, laws, whatever, and I see that immediately they're just not elaborating on these terms appropriately, I already know that they're a goner. It's just there's nothing here. And that's unfortunate because allow it doesn't allow for clarification for the veterinary space. And it also doesn't protect us from bad actors either. When you have this crappy old language that just it's not specific, it's not up to date, it poorly defined, it doesn't help anybody. It just causes confusion. So um, the same way we were talking about earlier with creating a platform that was the gold standard, what I thought as a seasoned veterinarian from the beginning, the hope was that that would eventually shape the laws, whether it's indirectly or directly, I don't care. And also, if anybody were to ever attack us, whether it's in a legal sense or a medical board sense or just online or whatever, we know for operating to the best of our abilities, to the best of what is considered the gold standard in the veterinary space, that we should be okay. And so far, knock on wood, it's been proven that's been the case here. So I welcome any discussions with medical boards, with organizations. They're welcome to challenge any of the concepts I'm putting forth. At this point, honestly, Kevin, we are so far ahead of what the current legislation even says that people still have conversations about things we've dealt with in 2018, 2019. Like, we're past that. The aspects of what you as an organization consider a challenge that we have to overcome, it's been overcome. You guys are just very late to the game, and we keep moving forward. We move way faster. And so anyway, anybody wants to talk to me about these concepts, I'm happy to. Ideas should be challenged, and I'm always happy to change how we operate if it were necessary. But what I really want is for folks who are in charge of the rules and regulations to consult with companies like ours who are seasoned in the field of telehealth and don't just create rules and regulations from thin air. Talk to people who are actually doing this on the ground, and then we can move the needle that way.
Yeah, very difficult when people are creating legislation devoid of realities on the ground in the profession, right?
It's so annoying because I guarantee you, I said this before. I'm willing to bet I'm the most experienced televeterinarian in veterinary history. And if you have a medical board who's trying to shape the rules behind this, and not a single member on your team has ever provided virtual care, or at least not provided virtual care in any consistent manner, or has not done so to the degree that we've done so, then I'm not sure what expertise you're bringing to the table here. Why not consult with folks like us who have been doing this, who've gone through it and improved and evolved based on trial and error, and find out why we're so successful, and then how to shape the future of this legally based on those parameters. So it is very frustrating. What you're alluding to is a very frustrating challenge that we have to deal with, but it is the nature of the beast, right? It's the only way to move things forward.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'd like to talk a little bit about another change wave that's sweeping the world, which is artificial intelligence. I know it's making significant inroads in a variety of medical professions. I'm curious, do you use AI within vet triage? And if so, what are some of the use cases in which you make use of it?
Where I can see it come into play for vet triage, and this is the same use that I would argue is probably the number one use in the veterinary clinic space also, is writing medical records. I think
Okay.
as a system that can hear the folks who are speaking in that exam room, the veterinarian, the assistant, the technician, the pet owner, and take those words, that speech, and convert it into written language, has been a godsend to the medical field. The biggest time suck for these veterinarians is medical record writing and documentation, because you want to be thorough medically, you want to protect yourself legally. Documentation is very important, but it takes a lot of time. And so the biggest use that I've seen so far with artificial intelligence clinically is that, and I think on our platform, if we were to implement it in the future, I think that's probably where it plays the biggest role, is taking
Mhm.
the transcript of what occurred and being able to analyze not just the words verbatim, who said what, and also the emotion behind it. How was that message conveyed? Because that also matters too, right? And of course, how can that system also take the not just the verbal, but the nonverbal communication that you and I have, for example, can they take that and translate it? So something like that is really where it's going to fit. We haven't dived into that world just yet because I'm worried about data. I'm worried about where data goes, and it's just the same way I mentioned that we are growing way faster than whatever the legal side is doing. Social media did that, right? They
Right.
grew without anyone saying what they can and can't do until like recently in comparison to when it started. And then now AI, same thing. It's already going, it's moving without any regard for any sort of legal boundaries, right? Because
Yeah.
legal
There's
moves
always pieces to pick up on the back end of that, so to speak, right?
by the
Challenges.
time we're in that field, I don't know, 10 years from now, maybe now we'll see some, video footage of Congress getting together and talking about regulations of AI. Meanwhile, 10 years in the AI world is like, who knows where the hell it's going to be by then. Um, so I'm worried about the security measures. We actually are HIPAA compliant on vet triage, which is not required in the veterinary space, but we did that because we didn't know what the future of telehealth is going to be, and we thought, again, gold standard. We want to make sure of the utmost in confidentiality and cybersecurity. And so my hesitation with AI right now is just the lack of control over where this information is going once we implement it. So that's the only reason why we haven't done so just yet.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, I've seen some of these systems in practice. For example, the exact use case you mentioned, very slick, very intuitive in terms of how it strips out the everyday, talk about the weather and the kids, and then it can sift through and find the real notes for the actual patient. So very compelling, and I'm sure it's just going to continue to evolve from there. So we'll see. Well, let's look ahead. How can platforms like VetTriage support better outcomes, like reducing euthanasia or expanding access in veterinary care?
So, the access to care aspect of the veterinary field has always been a problem, but now we finally are putting words to what the phenomenon is. Veterinary deserts, which are locations in a given area that lack easily accessible care in the veterinary space, it's a real problem, and it's not just in the United States; it's globally. And so, people are going to live where they're going to live. People live remotely, and they know that they're living in an area that doesn't have access to stuff easily. Well, there's veterinary deserts there, and so access to care becomes a problem. And then within all of that, too, spectrum of care is an issue. Spectrum of care is where you as a doctor, as a veterinarian, you're talking to a pet owner who has a sick animal about the various options they have for intervention. Everything from the Cadillac of the gold standard of care all the way to what can we do at a bare minimum level and everything in between. Spectrum of care takes into account the client's own culture, ethics, finances, whatever, their relationship with their animal, takes that and incorporates it into their decision for what they want to do with their pet. And the veterinarian's job is to give them all the different options, pros and cons of each of those options, and let the pet owner decide. That spectrum of care. It's not a one size fit all, and it's not like if the client doesn't want to do Plan A, they're bad people or bad pet owners. They're doing what they can within the context of their own lives. Okay, so access to care, spectrum of care, veterinary deserts are have always been a problem. They were magnified through COVID because adoptions went up, shortages in the veterinary space went up. Access to care was so difficult. Even if you live in Manhattan, where there's a veterinarian every block, you couldn't physically interact with them. Everything was slow because everything was curbside and masks and all that. So it was a disaster, right, for the veterinary space, and it just accelerated the need for vet triage. Is really what it did. Not happy about it, but that's what happened. So how we handle the euthanasias, and relinquishing and all that stuff, if we can lower veterinary care costs to pet owners by having them avoid spending hundreds or thousands at the emergency hospital and take care of their pet for $50 a call, and then they can go back to the regular veterinarian for care that's going to cost less than the emergency hospital would have. Well, there you go. Now you've saved that family's budget. They can now continue to care for that pet and not feel like they have to either spend $5,000 or relinquish them or euthanize them for a condition that could have waited for the vet to open the next day or the next week. So that's one very easy example. And folks these days, most people have easy access to internet, smart devices, videos, whatever. But even folks who don't can still phone in and talk to our vets over a telephone call as well. So that way everybody's taken care of. But that's a very powerful way is financial, saving somebody financially from spending all their budget they have for that animal in one visit, and instead they can go back to their family veterinarian. So the other way we help with access to care is preventing veterinary hospital closures. So there have been hospitals that have partnered with us that were on their last leg. They were moments away from just shutting it down. They don't have the staff to take care of this anymore. They keep cutting back their hours, right? And they were ready to quit. They found us and they've survived since then because now they can modulate their after hours based on partnership with VetTriage. So we help keep hospitals open. If we help keep hospitals open, that of course allows folks in that area to have access to those hospitals. We already are talking about veterinary deserts. So if the one ER hospital in that area shuts down, and now the next emergency hospital for that person went from being 30 minutes away to 4 hours away, well, you just changed the entire landscape for access to care. But if we can keep that hospital open by at least alleviating their staff after hours, is a win-win for everybody. So those are two examples of how we help with those challenges you mentioned.
Well, that's great. And you mentioned staff. I want to turn our attention just for a moment to your own staff, right? You've emphasized purpose-driven culture. How has that shaped your team, and how might it inspire other practice owners who may be listening to this episode?
So, purpose-driven culture, I define as being a culture that is stimulated, maintained, evolves with what your goals are within that profession. And I don't mean goals as in just making money, right? What kind of impact are you having on the community? The money comes. We know that. If you work hard and you follow your passions and everything lines up, money comes. But do you feel that passion? Do you feel good every day when your shift ends, you go home or whatever it may be? So we want to make sure that our team feels as though what they're doing is impactful, and they all know when I talk to them, whether they're veterinarians or nurses on the team, that our first goal of the platform is to spearhead the movement in telehealth. Our second goal is to help pet owners with access to care. Our third goal is to help our colleagues through partnerships. And when they hear those things and then they actually live it through us, it's phenomenal. They love it. A veterinarian, of course, can make way more money in practice. They're doing surgery and prescribing medications, and that's a different ball game. If that's your goal, great. And I encourage veterinarians, especially those who are newer to this field, you need to be in practice. Don't join telehealth. You need to be on the field, using your hands, using your mind, developing those skills. The telehealth aspect to it requires a veterinarian who's seen a case 1,000 times, but also is not doing it just for the money. They're doing this because they know they are creating a positive impact on multiple levels within the telehealth space in the field. So that's what I allude to when I'm talking about purpose-driven culture is just by nature of the work being so positive and impactful, the culture just continues to grow and improve from there, and it becomes a place that people want to work.
Well, that's great. I appreciate you shedding some light on that for us. What's next for Vet Triage, Shadi? Where do you see the business in 5 years? Let's say.
So there's a couple of aspects to it. I mean, one is, of course, we want to continue with developing partnerships. We currently have maybe 1,000 partnerships with facilities across the world, whether it's universities, 24/7 ER, multi-specialty, small general practices, boarding facilities, rescues and shelters, etc. And so currently our partnerships are in North America, so the US and Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia. And so we continue to grow. We've got conversations happening in Spain as well currently. But anyway, We want to continue expanding partnerships. We want to continue expanding the languages that we can offer people. Currently, we have English and Spanish speaking veterinarians. We do have a little bit of Arabic and French, but I'd like to grow those as well. We want to expand the species specific care. So we have VetTriage, which is non-equine. So anything that's not a horse shows up there. Then the equine platform for horses only. I'd love to break it down even further, where you have vet triage exotics, vet triage avian, vet triage, right? And you just keep on breaking it up. So you have specialists for those species. My vets are great with species that are a bit unusual to work with, but you would even love it more if there was a specialist working on that case. So those are kind of what I want to do with our current functionalities. And then in the future, aspects that are going to be huge. I think my predictions are going to be telediagnostics are going to be massive. So the ability for a veterinary facility or a pet owner to monitor their pet at home. Right now, the telediagnostic space is focused on clinics, and that's been the case for a bit. I mean, we had telemetry way back when I was an intern, '06, but that space has grown substantially on the veterinary side. But we're not focusing on what the pet owners can do, because if the pet owner can notice an objective data point abnormality with their pet, well, that's the first sign that something is wrong, right? As opposed to waiting for your pet to become really sick and then noticing symptoms. Can you monitor your pet at home with objective data with telediagnostics? So that's going to be a huge future trend. The telementoring, teleconsulting aspect to it will also continue to grow. We've always had teleconsulting. Your veterinarian will consult with a radiologist or with a surgeon in town or whatever, and talk about your case. That's always been a thing, but telementoring specifically has not. And having mentorship in a brick and mortar on the field is very difficult. That requires a lot of resources. It is, of course, the best option for mentorship, but it's just not realistic in scenarios. So telementorship is the next best thing. Live video, vet to vet. That's also going to continue to grow with vet triage as well. But those are some ideas that I have in terms of where we want to go with this over the next 5 years and where I see the space extending into.
Well, very exciting. Can't wait to see what comes next. It'll certainly be one to watch, and certainly happy for your continued
Yeah.
success.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. A lot of work goes into this, blood, sweat, and tears, and then the fact that we continue to see results means that we're on the right track. We're doing something right, and so I appreciate that, and I hope others are also excited to see what's to come. It's going to be crazy. The next 5 years it's going to be
Well,
crazy.
great opportunities for not only your business, but for pet owners and their pets. So it's fantastic. Shadi, you probably know that we close each show with a lightning round. These are quick questions with quick answers. Are you ready for that?
Oh, sure, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. What is one book that you'd recommend to aspiring vet practice owners?
James Harriet's All Creatures Great and Small, 1972, 73. So James Harriet, um, this book really does a great job describing what the classical veterinarian is thought of. No corporate world, no fancy diagnostics, no MRIs, right? Like it's just pure veterinary medicine, and it's a romantic vision, or rather a romantic historical recollection of what the veterinary space was, what it began as, you know. And then if you look at that world and you compare it to today, it's so different. It's not even the same. We're not even on the same planet anymore. So James Harriet's All Creatures Great and Small, to have an appreciation for what the veterinary field was and where this passion comes from, I think is a vital book to read.
Well, that's great. What's one technology you think every vet should adopt today?
I think in alignment with trying to find work-life balance, or rather correcting work-life imbalance, you should have an app that translates languages for you. That way you can travel. I think you should. I think because veterinarians are, I don't like using the term workaholic. I think there's a specific that means a specific thing, but we kind of use it nonchalantly. But veterinarians are workhorses. They will work. They are diligent, and even to their own detriment. So if a veterinarian can say, you know what, work life balance, I'm gonna make prioritize this. Well, then let's get an app that translates languages, and then visit that country and and go live. Go live a little.
Get out there and explore the
Yeah,
world, right?
yeah.
Uh, That's great. Well, what is your morning routine or your favorite, let's say, productivity hack?
So, 2 different, aspects to that. The fitness for me is my productivity hack. Something that allows the person to almost have a meditation type spirit to it. And for me, that's fitness. And maybe for somebody else, it's actual meditation, or it's reading a book, or it's watching a movie, maybe it's scrolling through TikTok or whatever, right? But productivity hack is find something that forces you to escape from the day-to-day, hour-to-hour, work that we are committing ourselves to. For me, it's the gym. And I think fitness for me satisfies both the mental and the physical. And that is what I would say is a productivity hack. My mornings are typically your standard wake up maybe 6, 7 in the morning, grab some coffee, and then I'm on the laptop. Within 10 minutes of waking up, I'm on the laptop, catching up on messages from my team, answering emails, putting out fires, setting the day up, creating joining my meetings. That's my morning, and so that's how I will start the day. And the goal there is to have the meetings back to back, and then basically by the afternoon be freed up to catch up on whatever I've missed after the meetings, or maybe now it's time to hit the gym, or go shopping or errands, whatever you have to do. But that's what I would say my morning routine is. Just it's wake up, coffee, and laptop.
Morning is your hit it time.
Yeah,
So it sounds like,
absolutely, and
yeah.
and it works out because VetTriage is busier, even though you think it didn't matter because 'cause we're global, we are busier on nights, weekends, and holidays, and so that frees me up for the
Mhm.
evening if my veterinarians need help, um, or a veterinarian calls out sick or whatever it may be. I have the evening now free to jump in and help them out. Otherwise, I'm just doing whatever I wanna do in the evening, whether it's recreational or just working on more stuff, but it works out that way anyway. Hit the morning hard, get a good start to it, gym time, refresh, recalibrate, and then whatever the evening needs.
Well, that's great. That's great. What is one quote or mantra that inspires you?
There's a quote from I might butcher this, I don't have it memorized, but there's a quote from the Mad Max movie, not the most recent one, um, the one with, Tom Hardy in it. It's
Okay.
my favorite
Mhm.
movie, my number 1 favorite movie. I absolutely love that movie. But there's a quote, they have, in the in the credits. It says it's something like, w "Where in this wasteland must we wander in search for our better selves?" Something like that. So the idea is you watch
Mhm.
Mad Max, it's a post-apocalyptic world, and
Mhm.
everyone's trying to survive, and you can apply that to our modern day civilization. We're all trying to survive. We all wanna find ourselves, and so that quote reminds me that whether you are in modern society with all the luxuries or whether you're in a post-apocalyptic hellscape, where can we for those of us who wanna find ourselves in this wasteland, where can we do that? How do we do that? And I think that quote to me is it resonates very well, and it just happens to be one of my favorite number 1 movie anyway, so it works out.
Well, that's great. That's the first original one I've heard that. So that's always good to hear something new and original. I
Oh,
appreciate
thank you.
your insight there. What advice do you have for new
Mhm.
grads who, frankly, let's say, what advice do you have to new grads to prevent burnout?
I'm gonna go back to the gym aspect. Find something. It doesn't have to be fitness, but find something that you can escape from. And and ideally, it would be not only escaping from work, but escaping from things like screen time, escaping from just the day-to-day grind, that we have to survive in as adults. You need to find and then it's not just finding whatever that is, you need to honor it. Don't skip it just because that day is just unusually busy or stressful. I just gotta do a few more things. I'll go tomorrow. Don't. It is mandatory in your day. And sometimes that means you're going to the gym at midnight. Whatever that you don't make excuses. You do that recreational, relaxing, meditation, spiritual like activity. You do it every day. You do it every day. Doesn't matter if you're on vacation, doesn't matter if the day got away from you, you do it. So many people get into veterinary school with they had a focus on health, and again, I'm going back to physical health because it's just the most obvious thing. And then they stop working out for 4 years, probably thinking, "Oh, I'll start again when I graduate." No, you're not. Now you're in your internship. Now maybe you're in your residency. Now maybe you have your first job. You're not. And now you have maybe now you have you're married and you have kids. You're not gonna pick that up again because you stopped it and you made an excuse for it. And it's a good excuse. I get it, but don't do that. So for new grads, find that meditation, whatever that is, hour and a half, whatever it's gonna be, and then you do it every single day without compromise.
Well, that's great advice. Great advice. We should all aspire to that, I think. What excites you most about the future of veterinary medicine?
I The most exciting thing about the future of veterinary medicine is that we will reignite the love and passion veterinarians and staff, veterinary technicians, receptionists, assistants, reignite the love and passion they have for the field. Because the saddest thing you'll hear is a person, generally younger, going to high school, undergrad, asking a veterinarian questions about the field. The veterinarian saying, "Oh, I wouldn't do this if I were you." That's a killer, right? Because you are taking all the BS that you as a veterinarian allowed to happen over decades in this field, and you're placing that blame on who? On who? You're the veterinarian. You're part of the problem. You're part of the problem. And the same way I'm part of the problem, right? So I'm trying to change it by with VetTriage. That's my contribution to it. So to tell a young person who's just enamored by this field of veterinary medicine, "Oh, I wouldn't do this. Don't do it. Do something else. Do something that'll make you more money or whatever fickle, alternative you're offering them." That's just poison. What are you doing, right? Maybe that person would have been the one person to actually impact the field in a positive way. That could have been Albert Einstein right there. That could have been Isaac Newton that you just shot down and
That's
discouraged.
right.
So, I hope not just do vet triage, go through other avenues outside of what I'm doing. I hope to see the field of veterinary medicine reignite its love and passion for this space, and that's really what we're trying to do overall.
Well, inspirational. Thank you for those insights. Dr. Shadi Ireifej, thank you so much for your time today and appearing with us here on Doc Secret, and really appreciate you sharing your journey with
Thank you
us.
for having me. This has been a ton of fun, and if you ever want to do it again, I'd be more than happy to.
That's great. Thanks so much. If you liked today's episode, please like and subscribe, and most importantly, share this podcast with others you think may benefit from the Doc Secrets shared here today.